Greetings friends and welcome. I'm Lorcan and this is Only War. We're going to be casting our eye over the state of humanity in the 41st millennium today. Particularly, how human is humanity in the grim darkness of the far future? So pull on your best inquisitorial big boy pants and settle in for some juicy heresy, because we're going to take some examples from across the galaxy and ask the question, you still human, brother? For the purposes of this discussion, any humans which have been genetically modified artificially to a significant extent are not going to be included. Looking at the remaining humanity of Thunder Warriors or the Astartes will be a discussion for another day. We really are taking our puny selves as the start point, and in most cases letting nature do pretty much all the rest. Let's get a couple of the bigger assumptions out of the way first. By the 41st millennium, our species would have been in existence for 240,000 years. We have evolved during that time. Humans today show an enormous diversity which is not apparent in the early Homo sapiens. It wasn't until humans started to spread to different parts of the world about 100,000 years ago that they encountered a variety of different climatic conditions and different physical adaptations became advantageous. In fact, the rate of change of DNA, and the rate of change therefore of evolution, has accelerated in a perfect coincidence over the last 40,000 years. Sections of the human genome still seem to be undergoing selection despite the comforts of our technology. Shorter, stockier builds give reduced surface area in cold climates to retain more heat. If you've got a broader, flatter nose, you breathe easier in hot climates, losing less water. Blue eyes better in low light regions nearer the poles, brown eyes better near the equator, etc. So armed with this wee bit of knowledge, you can work out a bit about yourself just by looking in the mirror, rather than going on some family tree website or talking to your grandma. Although you should talk to your grandma. She probably misses you. Anyway, back to 40k. So, let's assume that the humans that set out in the 15th millennium at the start of the dark age of technology were, broadly speaking, genetically pretty similar to modern humans, maybe with some slight loss of racial diversity, as Terra's climate became more consistent globally. The Age of Strife occurs, human civilization tears itself apart, and by the end, the colony worlds that survived were isolated from all but their nearest neighbours. On Terra, the Emperor and his biotechnical division starts tinkering with DNA, and there are references in the lore to him correcting the genetic flaws that had developed in the Terran human population. Why and how successfully he did this is again for another time. But let's just say it's a convenient way to let humanity take off the spiky shoulder pads and pretend everything didn't go all Fury Road for a bit. So, Terran humans passed their humanity test, with a wee bit of help from the glorious Big E. I'm also, for the sake of time, going to give a pass to any human world that has similar gravity, and would have had similar climatic or ecological selection pressures to Terra pre-Age of Strife, for the majority of the time period we're going to be covering. So the human population on tidally locked Mordian, parched virus-bombed Talaran, post-nuclear Krieg, and industrial hive worlds like Vostroya and Armageddon all pass the humanity test. Agri-worlds are generally pretty much no-brainers, so Tanith, you pass. Oh. Yeah. Moving on. The former occupants of Cadia also get a pass, partly based on conditions on their former fortress world being pretty similar to Terra, and it being resettled by most likely Terrans in the 32nd millennium. These later colonists developed violet-coloured eyes, as had the original human inhabitants who fell to chaos in the Age of Strife, but we've seen that eye colour links directly to the light conditions of the environment, and being so close to the Eye of Terror, we can assume that the purple hue has a benefit, developing over generations, increasing in frequency in the new Terran ancestors' population, just as it had done in the first colonists. The reason this isn't enough for me to label Cadians as abhuman subspecies is that, despite being rare, violet eyes do exist, and it isn't far enough from the range of iris phenotypes expressed in our population. So, pretty lacking in the purging in holy fire so far, and we were promised heresy, so let's take a closer look at a couple of meaty ones. Firstly, Necromunda. The majority of the denizens of the dozen or so hive cities of the planet originally known as Arrhenius Prime, now Necromunda, would get a pass for the same reasons as those of similar worlds we've mentioned. The Goliath, on the other hand, the big boys and girls of Necromunda are on the whole Genesmith clones, meaning they fall under the genetic tampering heading. They can be much larger than Astartes when grown in vats of amniotic fluids, but it's not these vat-born Goliaths that are the cause for concern in the Administratums snappily titled Tithes, Chamber, Notaries, Subdivision, Planetary Census, open parentheses, abhumans, close parentheses. It's the existence of the Nat-born Goliaths that caused some members of the Adeptus Terra to propose they may be reclassified as abhumans, and their status exists as a matter of debate. While the vat-born are mostly sterile males, and have a dependency on a constant supply of biochemical stimulants, which combined with the fact they are pressed into an existence of hard labour, normally pretty much straight out the vat, makes their lifespan brutally short. Concern of unsanctioned populations of Goliaths breeding unchecked was at first a mostly moot point. However, the Nat-born are Goliaths who are birthed by actual Goliaths. They're smarter and they live longer. The Nat-born have since been able to negotiate, learning the amniovat technology that was created by Houses Van Saar and their then partners House Escher to create the Goliath originally. This allows them to be able to maintain their own numbers with vat-born without being beholden to the other houses. Goliaths also need to wear a chem leash auto rig for the rest of those short lives to maintain the delicate balance of artificial stims that feeds their enhanced bodies. Without it, the Goliath's bodies will destabilize or go into overdrive and enter an uncontrolled state of growth akin to becoming a whole-body tumour. So, death. However, where there's a will, there's a way, and some Goliaths have found ways around this issue also. External agencies take great interest in Nat-borns because if Goliaths can fully free themselves from cloning technologies, it would cause a problem with them spreading unchecked to other worlds. Nevertheless, the administration has deemed them sanctioned on Necromunda, provided their development is monitored. Their usefulness and the opportunity of getting enhanced labourers and soldiers into the wider Imperium means this is probably quite a political decision. From my perspective, the Nat-born Goliath deserve the classification as abhuman. They meet the criteria within the Imperium of being a stable subspecies. They also meet our definition of a subspecies, under the assumption they're still able to interbreed and produce viable, fertile offspring with Terran-based humanity if the opportunity arises, despite their morphology being substantially above any normal parameters of the human genome. With the classification of Goliath as abhuman, it's obvious the Ogryn's Homo sapiens gigantus and Ratling's Homo sapiens minimus, and whatever remains of the Squats, Homo sapiens rotunda, also fall under abhumans. These subspecies were isolated geographically during the Age of Strife and evolved without artificial modifications, but under extreme selection pressures for long enough to form their own stable subspecies, with phenotypes very different to ours. For those who now wonder, could these abhumans still interbreed with us? Then the answer, whether the thought makes you more disturbed or aroused, is yes, if the Administratum's definition of a subspecies is the same as ours. Using an example from our own evolution, this is exactly what causes many scientists to push for the reclassifications of Neanderthals, from their own genus to a subspecies of our own, becoming Homo sapiens neanderthalensis, with us becoming Homo sapiens sapiens as a result. We modern humans have about 20% of Neanderthal genome assimilated into our own, with East Asians and Europeans having the largest proportion. While we used to believe we simply outcompeted or outright killed our shorter, heavy-browed cousins, the reality is we most likely did the same thing we've done throughout known history when different cultures of humans have met. We fight, and we fuck. And lastly, we come to possibly the most controversial one, a place where brutish men and women squirt out hot jets of man foam from every pore, and pretty much everything can kill you. We're going to Catachan. On Catachan, even the daisies want you dead. It's a green hell where every animal is carnivorous or poisonous or bloody sneaky enough to survive, with all the carnivores hunting and poisoning and devouring anything they can fit down their gullets. To make things even worse, some of Catachan's most lethal killers are small and seemingly harmless, so they will almost certainly kill you before you even see them. Basically, it's Australia. Dialed up to 11. In space. Catachans are confirmed to be physically superior to any human being. Being at the bottom of the food chain makes the mortality rate for humans on Catachan about 75% before adulthood, however. Generations of extreme natural selection by predation meant that only the strongest and most swole badasses make it to breed. Like the planets that spawned the Ogryn, Catachan has several times Earth's gravity. But it's not that extreme, or the Catachan people would be a good deal shorter and more like the Squats. The Ogryns managed to grow larger against the expectations of high-gravity worlds, most likely due to the brutal reality that the likely factor in whether your genes were passed on is whether you could overpower the competition, and probably sexual partners. Catachan's different. Here the selection pressures of the flora and fauna far outweighed those of gravity. Being dangerous over short distances wouldn't cut it here, nor would the cumbersome wit of the Ogryns, so Catachans are taller and bulkier than most humans, despite having no biological modifications unlike the Goliath. Of the selection of badasses coming out of Catachan, the exploits of Gunnery Sergeant Stonetooth Harker are the ones that might cause raised eyebrows as being within any sort of capability of a fully paid up member of humanity. This is a man hoiking a heavy bolter about like it's nothing, and when deprived of it, he momentarily killed a Tyranid Ravager by snapping its neck vertebrae between his biceps, before retrieving the gun and mowing down its mates. But Harker is noted as being substantially bigger than even the already huge Catachan norm, and his size and feats of strength are found in other regiments of the Guard. Try Again Bragg from Tanith and Sergeant Merrick of Venderland come to mind for size and ease of hefting some serious firepower. So the Catachans, despite their amount of unadulterated swollenness, get to stay in our species. Their morphology just isn't different enough. Had their isolation from the rest of the Imperium continued, then their eventual destination may well have been categorization as abhuman, and that could still occur in the future, but for now, the manliest of the Guard are still in the club. You may be wondering about the Navigators, but they're classified as Homo Navigo, so using our taxonomic rules, a different species in the same genus, not a subspecies, like the adhumans. They are likely highly genetically manipulated, possibly again by the Big E, and are categorized as mutants possessing a recessive navigator gene, which is responsible for their unique features. They're also much more prone to further mutation and a range of morphological features that vary too greatly to count as a stable phenotype. They definitely deserve a deeper look, but as they already lost their humanity card as far back as the Dark Age of technology, they didn't make the list. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of our look at the evolution of humanity in the 41st millennium. I hope you've enjoyed the journey. If you have, please consider giving this video a like, then hitting the subscribe and the bell, and I hope to see you again in the near future, where there is only war.